G'day guys, Tills20 here, welcome back to Oceania. Today we're going to be finishing off our circular key inspired build. We started working on this area in the last episode and today we're going to be finishing it off. Man, it turns out great, so I'm really keen to show you the end result. But before we get there, the skyline of Dundee has changed just a little bit. I've added in a few skyscrapers. You can see these tall white buildings. These are the Waterloo Towers. They are super iconic to Sydney, so it's great to have them within Dundee. And then we've also got this curvy blue building that is from Melbourne, and it's actually got the Ride logo on the side of it because it is the Ride headquarters, which is the transport company that operates within Oceania. So just a couple of changes within the city. But shifting our focus now to the build, and we're now down at the circular key inspired area, which we absolutely need to name. I can't just keep on calling it that, so if you've got some name suggestions, let me know. But as you can see, we've got a lot of transport options for people. We've got the metro, we've got the light rail, buses, ferries, you name it. Every option is down here, which is good because we've got a lot going on. We've got the Opera House, we've got Luna Park, we've got museums and shopping. There's a lot going on and we're going to be adding a lot more in today's episode too. But also we need to add a bit of detail because as you can see, just the bare bones, it's pretty much just the buildings and the transport options, but we don't really have much in terms of detail. And I also have a pretty big headland. We've got two big headlands over there. And at the moment, they're just two big green spaces. We're gonna continue that green space, but of course, make them functional and make them way better looking. And even added in a bit of an extension to the metro line, but all that is a little later. First up, we are fixing up this area a bit more because it is lacking a bit of detail. We have no safety railings, so I am going through and adding in some props just so that we've got a little bit of safety around here. This is a walkway, so I would like to have a little bit of detail and making sure that some of these imperfections are covered up. So I am trying to cover up these things using these planters, and that would have worked out fine if I could place trees along here, but because we've got this whole underground section underneath this pathway, that wasn't going to work out. So I decided to remove the planters and thought, okay, how about we do like an extended railing and then some sort of fountain here. And I placed this fountain, this might be a vanilla fountain, I'm not quite sure, but I placed that there, but it wasn't really the right, just didn't really work. So I ended up using this one instead, which definitely looks a lot better. And by the way, the whole reason why I'm using that in the first place is because there is a lamppost that's poking through and it's attached to the building with the ferry terminal down there, so I can't exactly just remove it. So had to cover it up somehow, so just placing down a fountain seemed to work the best, and I think that's probably the best looking option. It probably works the best. And then we've got these shops that are down here, but they just needed a little bit of detail. So I am adding in some seating and some awnings and also some custom brands. So now Rip & Chicken is down here, and then we've also got a Bruce Burger too with some billboards and some planters, and you can see all the people walking around. It's so cool. It's really it's become a real bustling area, which is a lot of fun. There are a lot of parks that are around this area. I've made sure to add in quite a lot of areas that are spawning like park generators, but then people are doing a lot of walking in between the public transport and going to the events that are happening at the Opera House. But then the Opera House just in general is a commercial building because it is a Rico building and it has something like 200 shops within it. So it is quite it generates quite a lot of traffic, which is really cool. So a lot of these people are actually just walking there to either an event or doing some shopping, which I guess maybe shopping doesn't make a huge amount of sense within an opera house, but I'm just happy that people are just walking around this area. And because we do have this key, which is, I mean, it's got these triangles on it, it's got the zigzag line going on. So it was a bit tricky to figure out how I was going to interact with the rest of this area. So I decided to just use some of this green space, like keep it as green space, and then using some of the brush tools to continue that pavement in other areas. And then just to create a bit of a border, we are using some of the hedges, which are quite good at creating a bit more of a border between some of these areas, because I feel like sometimes if you don't create some sort of border using a fence or a hedge, then it sort of feels like it's incomplete. So I'm just going through and adding in a little bit of detail like that. And try not to do too much in terms of foliage, just because I feel like a lot of this area should just be green space and, you know, trying to keep things fairly open. A lot of these areas are designed to have a lot of green open space, and it's, you know, kind of tricky sometimes because you just want to detail everything up and add in trees and add in shops and everything, but it's important to leave a lot of this space open because a lot of these places do keep a lot of spaces just for sitting around and grabbing food, and even events will happen on these spaces. So I am just being a bit mindful of that, but also just trying to not leave it looking under detailed, because that can also happen when you leave just green places like this with nothing going on. So sometimes a couple little trees, a couple little bushes, some hedges, and then that's about it. And giving people some food options too. So I am adding in some more cafes and seating places. I always forget about how good some of these eco buildings are, particularly the ones that you know, are made out of shipping containers. That's like a super trendy modern thing to do, and Sydney is all about that. So yeah, Dundee is all about that as well. So adding in some of those shipping containers because I just think they look pretty fun. And as you can see, the Opera House is starting to look super nice around here, but around this area was a bit tricky. I didn't really know how to work it in. You know, sort of imagined that there would be a lot of green space and a lot of areas for people just to walk around. So I am dragging that key nice and close to the road, so it is, I mean, it's pretty much so that there is no walkway or no walking space on the road. If people want to walk, they can walk along that path that's on the key. And then you've just got a lot of these green spaces, a lot of different types of areas for people to just sit back, relax, walk around. It would be a super pretty area just to go from one side of the bay to the other. A nice little chill out space from the hustle and bustle of the city. Stretching from the other side of the CBD is this metro line that acts a little bit different to the rest of the lines. You see, it hasn't always been a metro line. It originally started off as an industrial train line, connecting up a lot of the industry that sat on the shoreline of the city that has since been pushed out, which meant that the industrial line was no longer in use and sat abandoned for many years. But then the city, looking to make some upgrades to its public transport, saw this old line as a perfect opportunity to use the pre-existing infrastructure, the tunnels, the network. This is something that I'm taking inspiration. A lot of cities have done this, but Sydney did this with their light rail. I remember as a kid seeing this old train line and seeing it being transformed into the light rail network was really cool. I really enjoyed watching that whole process, and it's something that I've always really appreciated with cities and how they use pre-existing infrastructure like this. I find it gives little quirks to what are usually pretty ordinary types of things. Like a metro line is pretty ordinary, and if it's just done from scratch, it is pretty stock standard. But then when they're using infrastructure that is from the past, then it gives it little quirks, and that's what I've always enjoyed about it. So what I'm doing here is we're using old infrastructure from that train line in the metro line, which is somewhat fairly modern within Dundee. So this tunnel we're building right now, you can see that it is definitely a lot older than the station that we built, and it is definitely older than some of the other parts of the metro line, because that metro line, I mean, it's about probably 10 or so years old. This tunnel is definitely looking a lot older than that, and even the line that I ended up choosing, it is definitely of the older style. So we are trying to make this area look a little bit older than the rest of the metro, and probably the biggest challenge right now is getting it to fit within this key. Because this is a key, it's not possible to make a tunnel within the key. So I am trying to find something that looks fairly similar to the brickwork, and it's pretty hard. So I am just having a little experiment using a network and then using procedural objects on this pillar, which is pretty close. When you squish it all down using procedural objects, then it can get it pretty close, but I end up abandoning this idea. I just wanted to show you my process, even though I don't keep any of this. I end up keeping that brickwork, the network of the brickwork, and demolishing the rest of it because this just wasn't really working. So I ended up deciding to just drag out a pathway instead, and I used node controller to expand out the pathway so it connects up to the key nice and easy, or evenly, I should probably say, not easy. I guess both works. But I will end up changing the key on the other side to the other path, the Sydney pathway key instead, because I think it just works a little bit better, and it also sort of shows that part of the key has been upgraded and probably changed as this whole area has been developed over time, and then the other side of it is probably still fairly old, when probably the park we built over here, the Dundee Gardens, and it's probably old infrastructure from when when the whole area over here was probably all industrial. But this part over here, I was really struggling because it was a transitional area where I needed this whole shopping district and this ferry service to meet this area that is going to become a giant garden. And I know I wanted just one last building to go here, and I wanted it to be fairly large, something to be maybe apartments or even some sort of resort or something, and then also to have some sort of restaurants below it. So decided to go with this building. It fits in beautifully because it is in a bit of a triangle point, which is perfect for the train line that is also hugging that quay. So decided to use that, and I spliced in some of these vanilla growables that are just in there. I mean, they fit in perfectly, and I mean, I decided just to leave it at that. Left it pretty simple. You can see a couple of trucks making some deliveries, so I am stopping them from doing that. So the only vehicles that are allowed to drive on that road are service vehicles. So you will see a vehicle every now and again, and I don't really mind that happening because it just stops a lot of the crime and lack of services from happening as well. So that's not such a big deal. And yeah, I mean, as long as civilians aren't driving along there, I'm totally fine with that. And then this train line, I wanted it to go underneath this suburb here, which is Valeria, the probably nicest suburb within Dundee. It is super, super pretty and full of beautiful mansions as well. I mean, it's just the nicest area. And now they're getting a metro line that is going underneath, and I figured this would probably be I reckon the old industrial line would have done this as well, so I was totally fine with keeping it the old style. And then at the moment, it's just terminating at Valeria, and we're just going to decide whether or not we're going to continue the service into the next suburb and terminate at what is going to be a bit more of a, I mean, it's going to be another hub. We're going to have another transport hub with bus terminals, and even the passenger train service is going to be there. So that would probably make a bit of sense if it was to continue its service. Or maybe this is as far as it goes. You guys let me know in the comments. Do we continue it, or does it terminate at Valeria? This last part of the episode is when it all comes together, because we are going to be finishing off the episode with this big headland, with these two big headlands, which we're going to be turning into the Dundee Gardens. This area is inspired by the Botanical Gardens in Sydney. This is one of the largest green spaces within the city, and it's super pretty, great to walk around. And I wanted to add something similar within Dundee, but probably not as big. Definitely not as big, and honestly, something I didn't really plan to build. I actually sort of set out not to build this because I thought, it's going to look too much like Sydney if I did this, but I ended up having a lot more space than I expected, and it kind of, I don't know, it sort of worked. It just was the only thing that I thought would work in an area like this. I was also planning on building a naval base somewhere around here as well, which is also similar to what's going on in Sydney, but it's, I don't know, it just didn't really fit the area. I was going to put it on the second headland, but I don't know, after building this, it just didn't really seem to fit, and I felt like I should just continue this whole garden area before building something else like that. So I'm gonna save that naval base for the other side of the bay. I'm actually gonna make that whole area on the other side more inspired by Auckland and Wellington, whereas this side is taking more inspiration from Sydney. So I'm sort of thinking I might do that on the other side, but at the moment, this whole area turns out to be a giant parkland, which honestly is something we probably needed within the city. We have a lot of, it's pretty dense. We've got a lot of buildings and a lot of spaces taken up by concrete and, probably not a lot of green space. So building these areas like this probably works out the best. And then we also do have that giant green area. It's like a giant park. And when I asked you guys a little while ago, what do you want to see me build next? And a lot of people suggested that I finally get to that area because it's a bit odd looking. It definitely needs changing, and I totally agree. But I still don't really know exactly what I'm going to build there. I know that some sort of university is going to go there, but I don't know. I'm also sort of feel like I need to fill it up now, because now that we've got this area that is now like the big parkland of the city, we don't really need that big space. So still trying to figure it out. So I don't know, if you've got some ideas, let me know. But for now, we're going to leave it just as it is, and we'll get to it when I've got a bit more of an idea of what I'm going to build there. What I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that this felt like it was a big headland that has definitely been terraformed and changed and developed up. So what we've got is this road that goes between the land. So rather than going above the ground, on top of the ground, it cuts into it. And then you've got these sandstone quays on either side, which looks really nice. And I have made sure that we've got the same height level on either side, so it really shows that the land has been split. And then right on the headland here, I wanted to put a bit of an auditorium. I guess not really so much an auditorium, more of like a seating area where, probably houses some sort of events every now and again, and people can just come and chill and probably watch fireworks, which would probably be a huge amount of money to go there now. In Sydney, because we've got the firework display in the harbour, it's super pretty, but it's super expensive to go to any of the really nice areas that would probably be an area like this. So I know if you were to go to Botanical Gardens, you can't just rock up and go wherever you like. There's like 1 billion people there that have been camping there for days, and I'm not even joking. Like people are there very, very, very early, and then some of the other areas you have to book in. So a lot of these areas are now pretty tricky to get those spaces to watch New Year's Eve fireworks. But in Dundee, I reckon that would be a spot where it'd probably be fenced off and probably hard to get tickets reserved. And then for the rest of the park, because this is an area that has been landscaped and a lot of introduced species of trees would be around an area like this, I'm trying to use a huge variety of different types of trees, whether they be small or, different types of species. I'm trying to put down a lot of different types of trees. And I think that really sets aside from areas that are, more like, bushland or wilderness. I think that's a really great way of showing that there is a difference, because if you were to go into the bush, or if you were to go somewhere that is just wild, you would have a bunch of different types of species, but they would all be of a similar type of tree, if that makes sense. Whereas an area like this, you would have trees that would be introduced, and then trees that would be of like a particular species, which would all probably be in the same sort of area. So I'm trying to make sure that the area has a huge variety, as well as a bunch of trees that are of different sizes. And then I feel like that makes it look a little bit more natural, or if maybe less natural. I guess that's probably what we're trying to go for. And I'm also not really going to a huge amount of detail, just because this is a great opportunity to create green space, but also to save a little bit on FPS, and then also a great opportunity just to fill a big chunk of space and not detail it up too much. So, there's probably areas where we could be adding benches and, more detail and spending more time to work on it, spending more time and working on it, I should probably say. And instead of doing that, I'm just placing down things pretty quickly and just seeing it all flood. Yeah, seeing it all flood. Seeing it all come together nice and quickly. This was one of those areas where I just sort of started placing down and dragging out paths and not really worrying about too much of the detail work because, I mean, it's just paths and trees and the occasional building here and there. This building down here is an auditorium. I really wanted to have this open air cinema type of area. We've got one in Sydney and I've seen a couple of movies there and a couple of concerts, and it's pretty magical because when you see these movies, you've got the Sydney skyline behind the screen. It's usually at sunset. It's pretty magical. So I thought better give the citizens of Dundee the same treatment. So we've got that over there. And then you got to give them you got to give them a way to get over here. So we've got this path that goes over the metro and over this little road. And I thought, well, because the key comes with a fence, you can kind of see the fence poking through the pathways. So didn't really like that. So I thought that maybe a covered path would work better. You could kind of cover it up, but that didn't really work either. So decided to end up just making another custom one. So we've got this custom pathway. There is an invisible path that goes through it so people can actually access it, which is really cool. And I end up making this whole park the main park of Dundee because I think that makes sense. It is the main park. It is so connected up to the rest of the city. There's so many modes of public transport. I mean, there's no excuse for people not to come here. I reckon the parking would be pretty atrocious, but that's why I catch some of the modes of public transport. I mean, I've definitely set the citizens up. And I guess there's probably still a couple of suburbs that are not as well connected, but they have nothing to worry about because we're finally going to be building something that has been very much requested. Guys, thank you all so much for watching today's episode of Oceania. If you've enjoyed this episode, then leaving a like would be hugely appreciated. And if you want to go the next step further by becoming a patron and supporting the channel, speaking of which, these wonderful people have been patrons for bloody ages. Using Wayne, Dan Foster, Quarantine, Harrison Norris, KBN, Jacob Iverson, Gator the God, Samuel Liu, Michael, Mike BR, Tivadar Pinter, Nick Garn, Oliver Assis, Christopher C. Penny, Iki, Alec Williams, Brandon Ash, Micah McFarlane, Stephen Hayner, Bob Katari, Robert Maynard, and Kira Floke. When I mean bloody ages, I mean a really, really long time. So thank you guys so much for your support on Patreon. Guys, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!